If he's always on your mind without a word from him, it means you're falling in love with a fantasy, not a person. That's the hard truth. When someone is silent, when they're not calling, not texting, not showing up in any tangible way, what exactly are we falling for? Because it's not them. It's the version of them we've created in our minds. And that version, that illusion, is often far more charming, thoughtful, emotionally available, and invested than the actual person ever was. The brain does this strange thing. It fills in the blanks. It hates a vacuum. So when someone disappears or never really shows up to begin with, our mind creates stories. Stories about why they're quiet. Maybe they're just shy. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're going through something. Or maybe, and this is the most dangerous one, maybe they do care, but just don't know how to show it. That kind of thinking can keep you emotionally stuck for months, even years, because now you're chasing the potential of someone who's never truly been present. What's dangerous is that your imagination is working overtime while they're doing nothing. And the more you imagine, the deeper your feelings go, not for the real person, but for the image you've painted. You've filled them with your desires, your dreams, your romantic ideals. You've projected onto them the qualities you long for, not the ones they've actually demonstrated. You've built a connection in your own mind based on moments that never fully happened. Maybe you shared a few laughs, a few texts, a great conversation one night, and then silence. But your mind stretches those moments into meaning, into a story where he's the one and you're just waiting for the rest of the plot to catch up. But let me ask you something. If someone is really meant for you, if someone truly sees your worth and wants to be part of your life, how long would they stay silent? How many weeks would go by with no effort, no check-in, no, hey, I've been thinking about you? The silence isn't romantic. It's not mysterious. It's not depth. It's distance. And distance, unaccompanied by effort, reveals truth. There's a difference between thinking about someone and being with someone. You can think about a person constantly and still not have a relationship with them. You can have deep feelings and zero evidence that those feelings are being reciprocated. That gap, that enormous emotional gap between how much you're thinking and how little they're showing up is where the fantasy begins to grow. And here's the thing, fantasies are powerful. They can feel almost intoxicating. That's why we fall in love with them so easily. The fantasy version of this man will always text back. He'll always be kind. He'll always know what to say. He'll be emotionally intelligent and romantic and ready for something real. He will fill in all the missing pieces and soothe every insecurity. And because it's a fantasy, you'll never be disappointed. Because you're never actually dealing with the real version of him. You're just engaging with the version your heart created. But reality doesn't lie. The real version of him isn't texting you. He's not initiating. He's not trying to get to know you. He's not asking you out. He's not making space in his life for you. That's the only evidence you need. When someone cares, when someone is interested, when someone is ready, you will know. You won't have to guess. You won't have to fill in gaps. You won't be chasing some invisible thread, hoping it will lead to something more. Because when it's real, it's consistent. I know how tempting it is to hold on to hope. Hope that he'll come around. Hope that one day he'll realize what he's missing, that maybe he just needs more time or space or healing. And sure, maybe he does. But the truth is, none of that matters if he's not actively choosing you right now. Not one day, not eventually, not in the distant future after he sorts himself out. Because a connection that only exists in your mind will never satisfy you. It will never hold your hand. It will never show up on a bad day. It will never grow into something real because it's not real. There's something incredibly powerful about realizing this, because once you do, you take your energy back. You stop waiting. You stop watching your phone. You stop interpreting silence as a puzzle to solve. And instead you come back to reality, where your needs, your desires, and your heart deserve to be met with something solid. You deserve a relationship with someone who shows up, someone who speaks, not just lives in your thoughts, someone who reaches for you, who prioritizes you, who makes it clear through both words and actions that you matter. Anything less than that isn't just unsatisfying, it's a slow erosion of your self-worth. So if he's always on your mind without a word from him, it's not love, it's not fate, it's not something magical waiting to unfold, it's a fantasy, and it's time to wake up, because the person who's worth your love won't be silent. If someone is always on your mind, but they haven't said a word to you, no call, no message, no effort, it's important to stop and ask yourself, why am I thinking about someone who's not thinking about me? That's not a judgment. It's a human thing. We do it all the time. We get emotionally attached to the idea of someone before we've even built anything real with them. But here's the hard truth. When someone is always on your mind, but not in your life, it means your emotional investment is not being matched. And that's dangerous territory. We fall into this mental loop where we confuse desire with depth. Just because you feel strongly about someone doesn't mean there's a strong connection. It just means you feel strongly. That's not the same as a relationship. That's not the same as shared effort. It's not mutual. And yet we find ourselves justifying the silence. We replay the one amazing date, the few magical conversations, the spark we felt, but none of that matters if it's not followed by consistent action. Consistency is the difference between a fantasy and a future. See, emotional investment is built through time, effort, and presence. If someone disappears and you're still constantly thinking about them, what's really happening is that your imagination is working overtime. You're filling in the silence with memories, with assumptions, with hope. You're having conversations in your head that they're not part of. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start giving more to someone in your mind than they've ever given you in reality. That emotional imbalance becomes a habit. It becomes a fixation. And this is where it gets tricky. The more you think about them, the more your brain starts to attach meaning to those thoughts. You start to think, I must really love this person. Why else would I think about them so much? But thinking about someone a lot doesn't mean they're right for you. It doesn't even mean they're thinking about you at all. It just means you're investing energy, and energy creates emotion. The problem is, you're building emotional momentum all on your own. You're deepening a bond that doesn't actually exist on the other side. Let's be real. In healthy love, energy is reciprocal. When someone is truly interested, they don't go radio silent. They don't let days or weeks pass without reaching out. They don't disappear and leave you wondering if you ever meant anything. You don't have to chase clarity because their actions are the clarity. If you're doing all the emotional heavy lifting, you're not in a relationship, you're in a monologue. And I get it. It's easy to think maybe he's just busy, maybe he's scared, maybe I just need to give it time. But here's the thing, people make time for what matters. When someone truly wants to build something with you, they won't risk losing your attention by staying silent. The truth is, if someone wanted to talk to you, they would. If they wanted to be in your life, they'd show up. Silence is never an accident. Sometimes it's not even about the person, it's about what they represent. Maybe it's the way they made you feel for a moment. Maybe they triggered a part of you that hadn't felt alive in a long time. And now, in their absence, your mind keeps going back to that moment, not because of who they are, but because of how you felt. That's not love. That's a longing for connection, and that's okay. But let's not confuse the two. What you're doing is understandable. You're human. You crave intimacy, affection, attention, but you deserve to get those things in real time from someone who's there. You deserve to be on someone's mind, who actually reaches out, who actually makes the effort to connect, who doesn't leave you guessing. Thinking about someone constantly who's not reaching out isn't romantic. It's draining. And you deserve better than that. The painful truth is, if someone wanted to reach out, they would. If they cared enough, they'd act. And the longer you stay mentally attached to someone who's not showing up, the more you close yourself off to the people who actually would. Every day you spend thinking about him is a day you're not noticing someone who is reaching out. You're not open to the guy who's texting you back, who wants to know how your day was, who remembers the small things about you, because you're stuck on someone who's silent. And that silence is not a mystery, it's a message. Don't wait for someone to wake up and realize your worth. That's a story we tell ourselves to justify waiting. You don't need to wait. You already are worthy. You don't need their validation to feel it. You don't need them to come back and finally give you the attention you've been giving them in your head. You just need to recognize the imbalance and make a choice. Not for them, but for you. So if he's always on your mind and he hasn't said a word, it's time to match his energy. Not out of revenge, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. Start showing up for yourself the way you've been hoping he would. Start pulling that energy back and reinvesting it in your own peace, your own joy, your own future. Because the more you give to someone who's not giving back, the more you steal from yourself. Walk away from the silence. Don't chase echoes. If he's always on your mind and yet you haven't heard a word from him, there's something you need to understand about how the mind works. And more importantly, about what you might be doing to yourself emotionally without even realizing it. When someone disappears, when they go silent, our brains don't just go quiet with them. Instead, they do the opposite. They start working overtime. We imagine scenarios. We analyze past conversations. We scroll back through messages. We start replaying the good moments, the laughs, the chemistry, the eye contact, all of it. Why? Because the absence of communication creates a vacuum. And our minds, being the brilliant, sometimes mischievous machines they are, hate a vacuum. So they fill it. They fill it with assumptions, with fantasies, with the version of him that we want him to be, not the version he's actually showing up as, but the version we're clinging to because the truth that he might not be choosing us, that he might not care the way we hoped, is just too painful to sit with. But here's the trap, and it's a brutal one. When someone stops communicating with you, when they go completely silent, what they're really giving you is an answer. And I know that sounds harsh, but silence is an answer. It's not the one you wanted. It's not satisfying. It's not respectful, but it is in its own way a clear message. The problem is we often don't want to accept that message because it hurts, because it doesn't match the story we were telling ourselves. And that's when we start trying to find closure in the wrong place. We start seeking it in his silence. We try to decode his lack of response. We wonder if he's busy, if something happened, if he's afraid, if he's emotionally unavailable, but secretly still wants us. We create an endless string of maybes to avoid facing the most straightforward reality. He's just not showing up. He's not prioritizing us. He's not choosing us. And that's a bitter pill to swallow, especially when your feelings are real and deep and vulnerable. But closure doesn't come from him. That's the part no one really wants to accept because it feels unfair. It feels like he gets to leave and we're left behind to pick up the emotional mess. But the truth is, even if he were to give you all the answers you're searching for, even if he were to sit down and explain exactly why he vanished, why he lost interest, or why he couldn't commit, it still wouldn't erase the pain. And it still wouldn't change what happened. And most importantly, it wouldn't undo the part where he chose to disappear instead of communicate. So the closure you're looking for isn't a message from him. It's a decision from you. A decision to stop waiting. A decision to stop wondering. A decision to stop building stories around someone who isn't even showing up in your reality. Because the moment someone ghosts you or goes cold, they stop being a real relationship and they start becoming a mirror for your insecurities. We start to internalize the silence. We wonder if we weren't good enough, if we said the wrong thing, if we moved too fast, if we should have played harder to get. And suddenly, we're not just missing him, we're questioning our own worth. And that's dangerous because now we're not just sad, we're doubting ourselves. And that kind of emotional spiral can stick around long after he's gone. But let's pause for a second and zoom out. If someone can have this much control over your emotional world without lifting a finger, without even speaking, what does that say about the dynamic? It says that you've handed over too much power, not because you're weak, but because you care. And caring is beautiful. Vulnerability is brave, but vulnerability without boundaries is a recipe for emotional chaos. You have to recognize that someone's silence doesn't make you less lovable. The silence you lose, because it doesn't mean you're not enough. It doesn't mean you weren't amazing. It just means they weren't the right person, or they weren't ready, or they weren't capable of meeting you at the level you need. That's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix. So instead of searching for closure in a person who's disappeared, give yourself closure by owning your story, by saying, I showed up with love, I was real, I gave someone my attention, my affection, and my openness. And if they didn't value that, if they didn't honor it, I'm not going to devalue myself just because they didn't see my worth. There's a dignity in moving on without answers. There's strength in not needing someone to explain their failure to communicate, because your peace matters more than their explanation. Your healing doesn't need their permission. And your life, your beautiful, rich, evolving life, has so much more in it than this one person who couldn't be bothered to respond. So stop waiting for a message that may never come. Stop checking your phone, hoping for a sign. Stop reliving memories that aren't being matched with present action. Take all of that energy and bring it back to yourself. Invest it in your growth, your friends, your passions, your joy. Because the real closure, it doesn't come when they say, I'm sorry. It comes when you say, I'm done. And that's the moment you take your power back. If he's always on your mind without a word from him, it often means that you're using the idea of him to fill a space in your life that feels empty right now. And I want to say this in the most compassionate way because I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to get stuck in your own head, looping through imaginary conversations, playing back the few interactions you had, trying to figure out what he meant, wondering why he disappeared, and hoping desperately that he might reach out, that maybe, just maybe, he's thinking of you too. But in all of that noise, what we don't always realize is that the reason we're holding on to him so tightly in our minds is not necessarily because of how amazing he was, but because of what he represents. Sometimes we meet someone who seems to wake something up in us. Maybe he gave you a glimpse of the connection you've been craving. Maybe for a short moment you felt wanted, seen, even a little alive in a way you hadn't for a while. And when he faded out, you didn't just miss him, you missed you with him. You missed the way you felt, the energy, the butterflies, the anticipation. And in his absence, you're left not only longing for him, but longing for a feeling you don't know how to access without him. And this is where it gets tricky because the mind is so clever. When someone isn't around, we don't just forget about them, we build them. We construct this ideal version of them, not based on reality, but based on desire. We fill in the blanks of who they might be. We imagine how great it could have been if they just gave us more, if they just stuck around, if they just realized what we saw in them. But that version of him, it exists mostly in your imagination. And what's worse is that it becomes addictive. Because every time life feels a bit dull or lonely or uncertain, your brain drifts right back to him because thinking about him brings a strange comfort. He becomes a mental distraction from everything else that's missing. You see, when there's a space in your life, a space that's meant for fulfillment, excitement, connection, or even self-worth, and it's empty, the mind will scramble to plug something into that space. And if someone came along who made you feel something, even briefly, they become the perfect placeholder. They become your go-to fantasy when reality feels hard or uninspiring. And that's not love. That's not connection. That's escapism. It's like you're holding on to this idea of him like a mental security blanket, not because of how deeply you connected, but because he showed up at a time when your emotional world had a gap and he seemed to fill it, even if only for a fleeting moment. The danger is the longer you hold on to that fantasy, the less space you create for someone real to enter your life. Someone who shows up fully, consistently, and authentically. Someone who doesn't leave you in silence, wondering where you stand. And I get it. Letting go of that fantasy feels like a loss. It feels like giving up on something beautiful. But you have to ask yourself, was it really beautiful? Or was it beautiful in your mind because your life needed something beautiful right then? Sometimes, when we're in a season of life that feels boring, or directionless, or emotionally dry, we hyperfixate on someone because it gives us a sense of meaning, a narrative, a reason to get up and check our phone, a reason to dress up just in case we bump into them. It makes us feel like we're in a movie. But here's the truth. Real love isn't a movie. It's not built on imagination or longing or absence. It's built on presence, on effort, on consistency. So ask yourself, if he never speaks to you again, if he never texts you, never calls, never shows up, what are you really holding on to? Because if the answer is what could have been, then you owe it to yourself to stop living in the future and start living in the present. The present is where your power is. The present is where your healing is. The present is where your life is actually happening. And I want to say something else that's really important here. This isn't just about him. This is about you. When someone takes up space in your mind without earning that place through consistent action and mutual investment, it's often a sign that something inside of you needs attention. Maybe it's time to ask yourself, what am I avoiding by thinking about him all the time? Am I avoiding my goals, my healing, my loneliness, my sense of self-worth? Because here's what happens when you bring those things into the light. When you stop looking outward for someone to complete you and instead start building a life that's rich and full and exciting on your own terms, you stop needing someone like him to fill the void. You stop fantasizing about the person who isn't calling and start noticing the people who are showing up. You begin to feel more grounded, more whole, more selective about who gets your time, your energy, your thoughts. And when that shift happens, you won't be sitting around waiting for a message that never comes. You'll be too busy living. You'll be too in love with your own life to obsess over someone who vanished from it. So if he's always on your mind without a word from him, it's time to ask not where did he go, but what do I need to come home to in myself? Because when you answer that, everything changes. And you'll realize he was never the missing piece. You were. If he's always on your mind without a word from him, it's important to ask yourself, what's really going on beneath the surface? What are you truly craving when you think about him all the time? Because more often than not, it's not just him you want. It's what you believe his attention would make you feel. That's the piece we so often miss. We think I must like him so much, or this must be something special, when really it's a pull toward validation, and not just any validation, his validation, his attention, his affection, his message, his time, as if those things would finally prove something about you. But here's the hard truth. When you're sitting there, phone in hand, waiting for a message that never comes. You're not just missing him. You're questioning yourself. You're wondering, why isn't he thinking about me like I'm thinking about him? Why isn't he trying like I would try for him? And that gap between your effort and his silence creates a void that gets filled with self-doubt. Not getting a word from him makes you feel invisible. And when we feel invisible, we go into a kind of emotional survival mode. We start chasing that one person who we think can make us feel seen again. But let me ask you this. Since when did your worth depend on whether someone is giving you attention? Since when did the measure of your desirability, your beauty, your brilliance become dependent on whether a guy who can't even show up consistently thinks about you? When someone is silent and you're still obsessing over them, you're not really obsessed with them. You're hooked on the idea that if they finally said something, if they finally reached out, it would prove something. It would prove that you're good enough, that you were always worth the effort, that maybe all that overthinking you did wasn't in vain, that maybe, just maybe, your feelings were right and he does care. He was just scared or busy or emotionally unavailable but secretly into you. But those are fantasies. That's your mind playing tricks on you. Clinging to hope, because hope is easier to hold than rejection. Because if it's rejection, if he's not into you, if he's choosing to stay silent, then you'd be forced to face something you don't want to believe, that maybe you gave your energy to someone who didn't earn it, that maybe you invested in someone who never showed you real signs of investment back. And that hurts. It's painful to face that truth. But it's also powerful, because once you see that, you can stop letting this man be the gatekeeper of your self-worth. You can stop giving him all the credit for how you feel about yourself. And that's the shift that changes everything. You see, when someone doesn't text back or disappears after a few amazing conversations or never initiates anything, and yet you can't stop thinking about them, it's usually because you made his attention the proof of your value. You turned his silence into a personal reflection, when in reality his silence might say everything about him and nothing about you. Let's get real here. People who are emotionally healthy, who are capable of connection, who want to build something, they communicate, they show up. They're not perfect, but they want to make you feel seen. So when someone doesn't do that, that's not an opportunity to try harder. That's a moment to step back and ask, what am I really trying to prove here? And why do I think his opinion has the power to define me? Because the real danger isn't that he's not texting you. The real danger is that you've made his text, his call, his presence, the trophy. You've convinced yourself that if you could just get him to care, it would mean you're finally worthy. And that belief is the trap, because even if he did text you tomorrow, what would change? Maybe you'd feel that rush of excitement, that jolt of dopamine, that temporary high that says, see, he does care. But then what? You'd still be with someone who didn't show up until it was convenient, someone who only reaches out when they feel like it, someone who keeps you in emotional limbo. And you deserve more than limbo. You deserve clarity. You deserve someone who doesn't just take up space in your mind, but who makes space for you in their life. Someone who values your energy so deeply that they never want to leave you guessing. But before you can attract that, you have to stop chasing crumbs and start remembering your worth. It's not found in his reply. It's not proven by whether he finally says, I miss you. It's not dependent on someone else's recognition. It's already in you, but it's being overshadowed by this need to get approval from the one person who's never given you consistency. And I get it. There's a part of you that just wants the story to end differently. You want the rom-com turnaround, the surprise confession, the moment where he says, I was wrong, I should have fought for you. But that kind of story isn't built on real connection. It's built on wishful thinking, and wishful thinking will keep you stuck in relationships that only exist in your head. So the next time he pops into your mind, ask yourself, am I thinking about him or am I thinking about who I hope he could be? Because that difference matters. You're not crazy for wanting to be chosen. We all want to be loved. But your worth doesn't increase because someone finally sees it. It increases when you stop waiting for them to. You don't need a text to feel validated. You need a standard that reminds you you're already enough. And the moment you start living like you believe that, everything changes. If you're obsessing over someone who gives you nothing, no messages, no effort, no clarity, and yet they occupy your thoughts all the time, it's not just about them anymore. It's about what you're accepting. It's about what your standards are allowing. And if you find yourself caught in this emotional trap where silence feels louder than any conversation, then it's time to get brutally honest. Your standards are ready for an upgrade. When someone becomes a fixture in your mind without lifting a finger to deserve that space, that's a powerful signal. It means your bar for emotional investment might be set too low. If a person can disappear from your life and still dominate your thoughts, that's not a connection, it's a projection. You're feeding the illusion of intimacy without receiving any of the reality. And that kind of imbalance is the breeding ground for heartache, self-doubt, and wasted time. You see, attention should never be earned through silence. Yet somehow we convince ourselves that if we just think about them a little harder, if we just wait a little longer, if we just hold on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll come back, then our patience will be rewarded. But patience isn't noble when it's misapplied. It's not strength when it's covering for someone else's indifference. Waiting for someone who isn't waiting for you isn't love. It's self-abandonment. And here's the truth that stings at first, but sets you free. The fact that you're willing to obsess over someone who gives you so little says more about where your standards are than it does about where they are. It's easy to blame them. It's easy to say, he led me on, or he's confusing, or he must be scared of commitment. But the harder, more empowering question is, why am I so comfortable loving someone who's made me invisible? This is where your standards come in, not the ones you talk about, but the ones you live by. Your real standards aren't written in a journal or said to friends in conversation. They're revealed in the choices you make, in the attention you give, and in the behavior you tolerate. If someone is not communicating with you, not prioritizing you, not showing up, but you're still holding emotional space for them, that's the standard you've set. And that needs to change, not for their sake, but for yours. Upgrading your standards doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean becoming cynical or guarded or emotionally unavailable.